Fighting games can either be a competition of the highest level of skill or the great equalizer for casuals. The fighting game community, or FGC, is one of the most passionate around. It's a beloved genre for settling scores, developing rivalries, and forging some of the most epic and memorable memories possible in gaming. 1v1, combos, assists, tag teams, blocking, special attacks, button mashing, and way more complicated terminology. And today we'll discuss hidden gems worthy of the genre that are often overlooked. This is not a best of list, and rankings aren't necessarily by quality, but by how underappreciated or forgotten these titles are. And we're covering multiple types of fighting games. I have played all of them on this list and can personally attest to the experience being positive as a big fan of this genre. Here's 10 underrated fighting games courtesy of Curranator Gaming. Read by, well, me, again, Curry. Number 10, War of the Monsters. Arguably one of the more fun games to play split screen on with a friend, this one is a love letter to monster movie fans in general. Fully destructible interactive environments, combo systems, offensive and defensive supers, unique level designs, and more create an unforgettable experience, especially in multiplayer. The art style is wonderful, pulling from 1950s era sci-fi, and each stage getting a retro poster design for that specific character. And that roster is a mix of discount grade famous kaiju, avoiding copyright for this game, and some creative originals that keep the gameplay varied, and figuring out what items do what is never not hilarious. Whether you're desperately trying to reach the overpowered gasoline trucks, being crushed by buildings, or trying not to get impaled for the 8th time, there's so much to do in each level. On top of this, you have a full single player campaign, and lots of unlockable minigames that are a fun challenge. Robust single player, incredible with friends, charming graphics, solid gameplay loop, and a surprising attention to detail that make this one a must-have. If only the camera wasn't the worst enemy, but I can forgive it. Number 9, Dive Kick. I've probably played this one the least out of everything here, but I'll never forget it. Jump kicks are a fighting game staple, being a usually reliable move or what constantly gets noobs wrecked. Dive kick relies on this as the only move you can do per character, making a unique and innovative take on the genre that challenges traditional conventions that seem surface level but surprisingly deep. One hit KOs and only one attack. And at first glance, its simplistic 2-button control scheme, where players only have buttons for diving and kicking, may seem overly simplistic. However, this minimalist approach forces players to focus intensely on timing and spacing, creating a strategic mind game session. On top of that, you have a roster that parodies traditional fighters, is delightfully weird, and has some really self-aware comedy. But each character has a different dive kick that completely alters how you'd move and play. Rounds go from stupid easy to chaos so fast it's insane. It's accessible, yet retains depth, which is what you want to appeal to hardcores and casuals. I actually want mine diving back in to get a feel for it again. Too much bad dad joke? Okay, moving on. But check this one out. Number 8, Ragdoll Kung Fu, Fist of Plastic. And everyone watching this video said, huh? Whimsical, inventive, blends martial arts with physics-based gameplay mechanics, offering a refreshing twist on the genre while ingeniously, and sometimes annoyingly, using the motion-based controls in the PS3 6-axis controller, and I believe it was also compatible with the PlayStation Move. This can lend a more physical component to matches that's equal parts fun and frustrating when it didn't respond. But it also mostly works with just the controller too. The nightmare fuel-inducing ragdoll characters and their designs are memorable. Everyone looks like a cheap action figure that you get at the dollar store, and the platform fighter mechanics add a ton of fun, and it gets pretty crazy. If anyone else played it, you'll know that letting the menu theme load up while you were in the main PS3 UI would terrify you if the volume was too loud. And then it would be stuck in your head. Multiplayer modes support up to 4 players locally, which I greatly miss in so many games nowadays. Motion controls are used cleverly here, the art style is unique, and like many fighting games, it's best played with friends who just want to have a good time. It's clearly budgeted. You'll shout, "What was that?" at the TV more times than you can count here, and again, check out that theme song. Avoiding playing it for copyright. Number 7, Deadliest Warrior, Legends. Based on the popular TV show, Legends is actually the second deadliest warrior game. The first one is also pretty underrated, letting you play as a generic pirate, Spartan, or ninja, and so on, which is a ton of fun. But what elevates Legends is that it shifts the roster to historical figures, making it stand out. William Wallace versus Alexander the Great, Attila the Hun versus Vlad the Impaler, Sun Tzu versus Genghis Khan. and so on and so forth. The gameplay is surprisingly brutal and fast, where wounds happen in real time and death comes easily with realistic blows that would also be fatal in real life. There's environmental hazards, alternate weapons for everyone, fun interactive stages where you can fall to your death, and a weirdly memorable soundtrack. But on the use of sound, this is one of the special features. The game usually features silence or ambient nature foley's to heighten the realism in a match, and the tension continues to mount as audio cues tell you of your health. It's a clever way to unclutter the UI and add immersion to each battle. The game is completely unfair, unbalanced, and lacks some polish, but it's all part of the charm, especially the physics and the blood. Same goes for the original. Both are worth playing if you can get your hands on them. Number 6. X-Men Next Dimension. Everyone raves about the Capcom titles, the Legends games, or the first 2 Mutant Academy games. But did you know this is actually Mutant Academy 3? Yep. It's got a huge roster with really wildly fun mechanics, fast, has a darker art style, and it's really easy to pick up and play. Now, have you ever played one of those games that seems simple, but you could probably discover a ton of elements if you dedicated time to it? That's how I've always felt about this one. I mean, there's 24 playable X-Men characters here, and an exclusive one to Xbox. There's so much to learn and discover, and there's a lot of love of the source material present. It's got your typical fighting game modes, but it also has a full-on story mode that I've never played through with cinematics and features some pretty iconic stuff, including some plot threads and characters connected to a lot featured in X-Men 97 as of recently. All in all, this game was clearly built with a ton of passion for the property, but also crazy fighting game enthusiasts who want cool combos and special powers displayed. It's sad how forgotten it is, or overlooked it is, as it had great ideas for its time as a 3D fighter. Apparently, it was inspired by Dead or Alive 3. Neat! Number 5. Godzilla Save the Earth. Huge Godzilla fan here, and if you ask me, this is the best Godzilla game ever made. You have a quintessential roster that doesn't have everyone, but most of the heavy hitters of the 3 eras at the time. There's notable omissions, but budget is a thing. However, Megalon is here, and he's ready to be bullied. Poor guy. Of the 3 games in the Pipeworks Godzilla trilogy, this one has the most going for it. It has more characters and stages than Destroy All Monsters Melee, and it's faster, more refined, and doesn't need motion controls from the Wii version of Unleash or the slow PS2 port. One of Save the Earth's standout features is the combat. The way in which it depicts special attacks, destructive capabilities, the physical components of each monster, throwing buildings, everything that you can use to bully Megalon with is incredible, providing a balance of epic scale and wild chaos. It is a party brawler, and 4-player is rightfully insane with friends, whether doing versus mode or the plethora of minigames like basketball that you can also bully Megalon in. In addition to its engaging versus mode, the game offers a single-player campaign where you players can embark on missions and challenges across different cities, facing off against other kaiju and defending Earth from various threats. Some missions have you fight, some have you defend, and some just get you to wreck the city. I remember the final boss being Orga in all 3 forms from Godzilla 2000, and it's actually really challenging. The graphics hold up well, conveying the scale and spectacle of the battles while staying true to the iconic look of the Godzilla franchise. All in all, it's a faithful recreation of the Big G versus other monsters in the gaming space, and people have been clamoring for the Pipeworks Trilogy remaster in HD for years. Make it happen, Toho. Pipeworks is on board. Number 4. PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Honestly, I debated putting this one even higher, if not for a couple obvious flaws we need to talk about. The game lacks the content needed to really give us more to do as a solo player. A true story mode could have gone a long way and been a ton of fun. The deep cut final boss, which is excellent as the abandoned PlayStation mascot, was lost on the casual audience. I remember having to explain it to a ton of people. And the roster had some glaring omissions or oddball choices, missing the likes of Crash and Spyro, probably due to licensing, having the unpopular version of Dante from DMC, and having stages and weapons that don't have a character, such as Resistance having the Hedgehog grenade, but the Chimera or Nathan Hale aren't in it, and they would have been awesome. But the biggest reason this one failed is because it was dismissed as a cheap Smash clone and poor imitation. But really, in hindsight, it was way ahead of the curve. It came out at the wrong time. If it was released nowadays, I think it would be loved. Look at Multiverses, Nickelodeon All-Stars, and Brawlhalla, many imitations that do things incredibly similar to Smash Bros. And the PlayStation brand is more loved and popular than it was in the PS3 days. PS All-Stars Battle Royale, that name came before that subtitle was a genre of gaming. It was unique in that it wasn't ring out, but had an energy meter built to use supers to KO an enemy. This added a different strategy and extremely fast-paced, aggressive nature to the game, because you had to attack to build it up. Issues aside, the roster does have a lot going for it, and includes most of the big picks that you could want from the era. The love of PlayStation history, detail in the stage designs, character animations, and voice acting were all top-notch and took advantage of the premise. But the most important thing, it was fun to play. It sold decently, but not enough to warrant anything but a little bit of DLC. I wish it would get a port or even a modern day sequel so it could really live up to its potential and take all the modern day exclusives into account. It's an awesome game, a good idea, and one where exclusives and guest characters can thrive in the console wars. And it was on Vita, for free if you bought the main game. Problem was, no one had a Vita. I think PlayStation learned the wrong lessons, and I hope they explore this concept again. Like multiverses, it's not a terrible idea for a live service game nowadays. Think about all the classic characters who could be in it, how licensing seems easier to negotiate nowadays with crazy crossovers. Spider-Man versus old Kratos versus Aloy versus Joel, anyone? Can I also mention the elaborate marketing and live action trailers? They were so flippin' cool. And the fact that it's canon referenced in Ragnarok is amazing, even if it's a little bit of an insult.
I heard you did battle with beasts, scoundrels, princesses, the undead, automatons, and history's greatest musician. That's not true, is it?
Number 3, Marvel Nemesis, Rise of the Imperfects. Sometimes there's a huge disconnect between critical reviews and people who purchase the game. In my humble opinion, this is one of the biggest. I absolutely adore this game. It stands out in the genre for its depiction of Marvel characters and original new characters known as the Imperfects, each equipped with experimental powers that add a fresh dynamic to the battles. The combat takes huge inspiration from Power Stone, among others, with big 3D open square levels, tons of environmental hazards, and fast-paced brawling. It also takes cues from Mortal Kombat with a vanquished fatality system that feels random or completely overpowered to trigger. I have some of the fondest memories in Versus mode with a friend of mine in this, and inside jokes we still laugh about to this day. We always joked that when Venom would get ringed out, he looked like he was holding and playing a Game Boy really close to his chest. And those matches, if you set the lives all the way up, can last forever with ring outs, beatdowns, finishers, environments crushing you, and more. There's wonderfully ridiculous physics. It's totally broken when you pick a character with super strength or movement abilities. The overall tone is pretty dark compared to Marvel's appeal nowadays, and that's exactly why I love it. How about that opening cinematic setting the stage? We get a beat-em-up style campaign reminiscent of something like Tekken Force or Devil Within or Conquest mode, and the boss battles being the traditional fights. How it incorporates the new Imperfects is clever and adds stakes as you use the Imperfects to take out the other heroes. And it gets tough at times, and sometimes just completely unfair. The roster is balanced between the niche and popular of the time, there's solid voice acting, and the presentation screams 2000s comics. Sure, the game is a bit glitchy, but glitches back then were sometimes seen as an endearing factor. People often say that they want a Marvel version of DC's Injustice, but really this was it. And it predates Injustice, an original Marvel fighting game with a storied reason to depict them as evil or more villainous, or the reasons they were fighting each other. And those villainous designs are sweet. There was a PSP version that was pretty cool too, with a couple exclusive characters not seen in the console version, but I wish they had been. This is one I think that came out at the wrong time, and a remaster, or port, or heck, even a remake would serve it well. But it's probably not going to happen, ever. But then again, with the renewed interest in the Marvel Capcom collection, anything is possible. I still gotta read the actual comic line based on the Imperfects. Number 2, Mortal Kombat, Armageddon. You may be asking, doesn't Mortal Kombat usually review and sell well? You would be right, but the community tends to be pretty harsh on previous games. With this entry and the top spot, I really believe these games had it all, but this one especially I see get dragged through the mud. Now, the 3D era combat system has never been the best in MK, but it had its fans and it still was fun to play. People hated the fact that a fighting style was removed, that original fatalities per character were gone, some movesets were cloned, on top of a less balanced system than Deception, and some asset reuse. I think there's validity in a lot of that, but I'll take every MK character ever at the time being playable over an additional moveset and cloned character to make them playable. To me, that's good fan service. Balance is one of those things I don't worry about too much, as we've seen people like Sonic Fox time and time again take a low-tier character in a fighting game and show the world how overpowered they can be in the right hands. The original fatalities being gone is a little sad, but I loved the creativity and unpredictability in the creative fatality system, although it probably should have been reserved only for character creation. Speaking of, this is one of the best in the genre. The customization is widespread, with fun nods to Marvel Comics, gaming, and they had Goku's hair. You can even edit special moves, strings, and attacks to what you wanted from the selection. You could also type out an arcade ending, seen cheap by some since it's used for the main roster, but still the image VO'd cutscenes never really did it for me and still don't really. Every previous stage from the previous 2 games were present with the death traps, and they added air combat, which to me is a great system that gave a whole new dimension and speed to the often criticized systems of the 3D era. There's a lot to love about this time and art style. Mortal Kombat was self-aware, but still fantastical in a fun sense. It knew when to be serious and when to lighten up and be satirical. And the story showcases that perfectly in Conquest mode, which is one of my favorite modes to this day. It's a good gateway into MK lore, despite being set at the end of the timeline, and I started here with this game. But it's also a full-on adventure, beat-em-up, hack and slash in its own right, mixing Shaolin monks and the beloved mode from Deception. Interesting level settings, great humor with the game picking on you, fantastic combat, and abilities, plus a bonker story that truly does act as an ending but leaves it open for more. Plus the boss battles were done as the traditional fighting game mechanics, so it was a fusion of my favorite 2 types of games together. But to set the stage, they go absolutely all in with one of the greatest, most epic opening cinematics that I still watch from time to time to this day. Oh, but wait, there's more. There's also online play, which was cool, but I didn't have access to it because I was too young. And of course, the beloved kart racing mode, Motor Combat. Worthy of its own spin-off game, but has enough merit to be a mode here with everything you could expect from an MK racer, and it's so much fun, especially with friends. It's hilarious, it includes fatalities, death traps, and it's just really cute and hilarious. This game is bursting at the seams with content, personality, and love for the franchise. They truly went all out before microtransactions would eventually take over. It may warrant some criticism, but it's truly a gem and one of my all-time favorites. Why can't we get a game this feature-rich with the gameplay of MK9? Maybe one day. Before we get to number 1, what's your favorite underrated fighting game? Leave a comment after you smite that like button. Number 1, Soul Calibur 3. How is this underrated? It was well reviewed, and the fan community loves it. Let me remind you that the PS2 exclusivity and the lack of guest characters outside of Create a Soul equipment really hurt the sales. There was huge rumors at the time that Dante from Devil May Cry was going to be in it, but turns out that was debunked as an internet rumor. But imagine had that happened, what would have been different? What about if it had been on all consoles and they had the console exclusive characters again? I think it would have appealed more to a casual fan base. Let's address the biggest thing that it did. Character creation, original from the ground up. This game pioneered that for the series and arguably for fighting games as a whole. But it's not the same as later entries, where you just edit a pre-existing character style like Siegfried and use his weapons. That's present here, but they added 11 occupations and one that's kind of like a sword master of all that, get this, are all unique independent movesets from the main roster. Some are similar, but still have different moves and combos. There's an argument to be made. They aren't as fully developed, but I always had a blast even on higher difficulties and got to where I would only play as these guys. The game uses these occupations to make its own bonus roster of characters too, with some fun nods to the franchise, such as Arthur and Huang being in here. And this is where Amy got her start. These occupations range from things like pirate, ninja, barbarian, thief, and so much more. Personality changes based on equipment, and then you can take these characters into an RPG-like tower defense RTS hybrid called Chronicles of the Sword. This mode is goated, aside from the save glitch, which did cause a lot of problems. You take your created character through this mode, can automate battles, or engage the fights in a classic match. It's incredible, and a way to immerse yourself in created character's shoes. Now, admittedly, I'd love to see a more Conquest style mode one day with hack and slash gameplay, but we'll see. But this was super unique, and it was a way to be different from Mortal Kombat. Now notice we haven't even gotten to the main portions of the game yet. This entry included 3 mainstays for the franchise that were newcomers: Zasalamel, Setsuka, and Tira. All phenomenal characters with unique weapons that are considered iconic. Without the bonus roster, this has the largest cast of an SE game, and with it, it's massive. The stages, music, and graphics are all top notch, and in my opinion, I actually appreciate the refined mechanics this one presents in the combat system as opposed to 2. There's a story arcade mode hybrid that does allow for player choice cutscenes with different outcomes. That's a blast to take characters through and see all the different endings. There's a ton of weapons to unlock, a mode where the weapons have different effects, and that's not even all the modes. There's almost too many to count. There's so many characters, weapons, and solo-friendly play stuff with interesting lore wrinkles that kept me busy for untold hours as a child, and I didn't even do everything. Heck, you can play as all of the shopkeepers in the different stores in the game. How and why so many look past this one when it's designed to be the fullest fighting game experience possible, quote from the developers, is beyond me. But then you also have the hardcore fighting game base that hate it when a follow-up entry is slowed down a bit, and care deeply about balancing mechanics for competitive play, which apparently in this one there's a huge glitch that creates more invincible frames and faster recoveries, leading to already OP characters being broken. I don't really care about any of that since the game is fun to play, but the one I'll admit is a huge problem is that the file corruption save glitch from one of the modes was really problematic for memory cards. We didn't have patches back then, and of course there was no online play on this game when other games had it, which hurt the longevity. But what's frustrating is the positive aspects of this game are often skipped over, glossed over, and when discussed on fighting game channels or rankings for all these said reasons, people go, oh yeah, there was Soul Calibur 3, it was pretty fun. Anyway, and they move on. Whether for not being iconic enough, not having the guest character, or not being hated, it's just forgotten. But let me tell you something. All of these issues may be valid, but ultimately, who cares? They're hogwash, because this is arguably the most feature-rich fighting game ever made, right next to Armageddon. Easily my favorite in the Soul Calibur series. It did get more praise after the arcade edition was released, which better balanced the gameplay and made a few of the bonus characters more fleshed out. I fully believe that if they married the two versions like modders did, or released an anniversary collection that had vanilla Soul Calibur 3 without online, but had online for the arcade edition in the port, it would be universally beloved. You can ask a lot of casual players of Soul Calibur what their favorite is, and they'll tell you Soul Calibur 3. Typically the hardcore audience will tell you Soul Calibur 2. But honestly, can you go wrong with either one? I cannot stress enough to Bandai Namco, please do this for the series' 30th anniversary in 2025. It's a franchise that needs a strong comeback, and like Marvel vs. Capcom, a collection could be the way. Just like free MVC2 brought back that. Let's start a hashtag free SC, free Soul Calibur campaign. Just give me a way to play 3 again, really all of them, on modern hardware. Like other games on this list, I have so many wonderful memories and inside jokes from the legendary fights I've had in this game. It's like a long lost friend. Fighting game fans, if you like Soul Calibur, don't skip this one if you have the hardware. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more lists like this in the future. Curranator Gaming out.